This is the Nobel Podcast, where we talk about how to optimize your technology, life, and mind. We're joined by special operations veterans, entrepreneurs, investors, and others who have overcome difficulty to make it to the top of their craft by staying in the fight.
What's your name?
Carter Stapleton.
So we're going to go over kind of your life, but basically from Carolina?
Yep, from North Carolina.
D1 soccer player. Your family is a former president, Naval Academy, Navy, 3-letter agencies, and now ZeroEyes.
Yep.
So let's start it. Where'd you grow up? Tell me about that.
Yeah, so originally born in Fayetteville, North Carolina. Grew up in Greensboro, which was great. Went to a really good high school, had a lot of fun. Played basketball, played soccer, which was great. Older brother, younger sister, which was awesome. So I got to grow up with them. Really good community, had a lot of fun, and then took off for the Naval Academy. So pretty much
let's start here. Right. I know some of the background. We worked together very closely. Why did you go to the Naval Academy and not other schools? What did you know about it? What did you grow up with? Your idea of what it was?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. So the first time that I heard about the Naval Academy, it was through a recruiting letter. So the soccer coach had written me a letter. I brought it out, talked to my mom, talked to my dad, and was like, "What's the Naval Academy?" I didn't even know what it was at the time. And they were like, "Well, it's like West Point or anything like that." And so I took the letter and I threw it away. I was like, "That'll never happen. I'm not going to a military school, like not a chance." So I was heavily recruited by some big D1 schools in North Carolina. Was planning on staying there, and then my parents started talking to me again. They were like, "Your great uncle went to the Naval Academy." And I was like, "No, I didn't know that because I didn't know what the Naval Academy was." I was pretty naive.
Who is your great uncle?
So Jimmy Carter. So
Okay.
the 39th president of the United States, that was a wild time growing up with him around and like going to see him and spend time with the family and stuff like that. And then I started talking to my parents about it and how prestigious the school was, engineering school, having a job, going to serve your country right after. And the more and more I learned about it, went on an official visit, drove over that bridge that still makes me want to throw up when I'm driving back to the academy.
Why?
Just because of the bad feelings.
Why does it give you bad feelings? What is it about it?
Basically, we got the shit kicked out of us for like the entire first year. And then the 3 years after that sucked pretty bad because it's strictly military.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's just, I guess it's pretty anxiety producing going back over that bridge and just remembering all of those terrible memories of the ass whippings and stuff like that.
I mean, arguably, we have a lot of people in the company who, went to a service academy and people hold it in high regard. And, that's kind of a different take of like, I have only misery associated with it.
No, I've always wanted to burn it to the ground. So a different approach, grateful for everything that it did for me, grateful for coming out, grateful for having a job, serving the country, doing 10 years. But I had an interesting take on it. I was a little rebellious. Like when somebody tells me to not do something, I automatically go and do it. I've just always been like that, which is a terrible trait to have, but
so
something that
you went there for sports. You went there for soccer. So what was it like being an athlete there?
It was good and bad. So at that level, it's another job, right? So like you have a lot of commitments, you're doing that full time, and then you're coming back and studying until 1, 2 in the morning, waking up, repeating, and then you're gone, missing classes, trying to catch up. So it was really tough, but then it was also a break. So like as a plebe or a freshman at the Naval Academy, you could get away, you could go to the soccer locker room and take a nap when most people couldn't and stuff like that. So you could get away from things, just play soccer, get your mind off all the bullshit that was happening there and the misery of that like freshman year. And it was obviously a very high level of competition, which was awesome. So soccer was a blast, and it was also just a lot of work, especially going to like a school like that.
So tell me about the recruiting process. We've talked about some of these stories, and I think some of them are interesting. What was recruitment like going to other schools versus the Naval Academy?
It was a lot of fun. So recruiting visits are a blast. They bring you in, they show you the best parts about the schools, what you're doing. I got one school that I got uninvited to. That's an interesting story.
Tell me about that. So you were invited to go, potentially like, hey, play soccer here, come visit. What school was that, and why were you uninvited?
Yeah, it's one of my favorite places in the world, actually, Wrightsville Beach, UNC Wilmington. So I was going there on an official visit. I'd already talked to the coach about scholarships and stuff like that. And about a month before, we were under 17s at the time. We were playing an under 19 national team. They were going to nationals. So it was college players that were like playing for their club team the year after they had graduated. This dude was 2 years older than me. He kept clipping me, kept talking shit for no reason. I was like, dude, you're 2 years older than us. Like, what are you doing? Like, you should be killing us, first of all, like, but you shouldn't just be a dick about it, right? So finally, at the very end, towards the end of the game, he came through, swept out my legs. I got up, broke his nose. Turns out he was the captain of UNC Wilmington. So the coach called me the next day. I pretty much lost a scholarship to Wilmington because he was the captain there, broke his nose. He said if I came on campus, he was going to kill me. I was like, I don't know if I'm scared of somebody whose nose I just broke. But... And then I lost a scholarship to UNC Greensboro, which was like one of the top tier programs in the country at the time. They were ranked like number 1 the following season. My coach was the assistant coach there, and that head coach lost a lot of interest because of my retaliation. So that was tough.
Just a bad egg.
yeah. I mean, that's what they thought. So, and I was like, you know what? Maybe I do need some structure.
Right.
The academy, when I did come over that bridge the first time, it wasn't anxiety producing because I was on an official visit going for fun. And I came over the bridge and it was just a beautiful, beautiful campus, beautiful architecture on the water. I've always loved being on the water, grew up around the lakes, going out on the boats and stuff. So yeah, I fell in love with the campus right then. And I just didn't really know what I was completely signing up for, I guess, at the time.
So as you're going to school, I mean, Jimmy Carter very famously is a Naval Academy alumni. What was your interaction with him in choosing the school and going to the school?
Yeah, so we didn't talk about it too much. Whenever I'd see him, he'd just say like, go Navy or something, like, how's everything going? He gave me a really cool map when I went to prep school. I graduated prep school. He gave me a map of the world, signed it, said congratulations on that.
You skipped something there a little bit, prep school. What does that mean?
Yeah, so when I was getting recruited by the Naval Academy, they had 12 starting seniors. So the coaches talked me into going to prep school so that I would have a year to get faster, stronger. It's like a year of playing college. You play like D3 type schools.
Like a junior college or something like that.
But it's kind of sucks.
It's called NAPS, right?
It's called NAPS,
Academy Prep School, yeah.
Yeah. And the only thing that really sucks about it is you do your whole freshman curriculum, which is very tough at the academy, and none of those credits count for anything. So you do an entire freshman year of academics, and then you go do that entire year of academics again at the Naval.
Worth it?
I mean, it was fun. I met some of my best friends, some of the people that I would literally do anything in this world for. Most of them are from that year. So definitely worth it. It was a really good bonding experience. We also got paid to go there. So we got like E1 pay, which was significant for college.
Right. Make that the E1 pay.
It's better when you're broke, Somebody gives you $600. You're like, okay, I could live on this for a little bit. So
okay.
It was a good experience. Yeah.
So now you're in the Naval Academy. Were you a troublemaker? Did you follow the rules? You just did your sport? Well, how did that work?
Yeah, like I said, I've never been one to kind of like follow orders. I think that's why people didn't think I was going to make it through there. I had a few people tell me like, don't do this. You're not going to graduate. And I was like, fair, but I'm going to give it a shot. One of the things that I joked about before I actually went to the academy was that I was going to put it on Playboy's top 25 party schools. That didn't work out at all how I thought. It is not a party school. It is a very strict school. I got put on restriction my freshman year, lost my entire summer. How did
you get put on restriction?
So, it not being a party school, there is one very big party week, and that's senior week when everybody's doing their commissioning and graduation and all that stuff. So, I was fortunate enough to be close with some of the seniors, which is, I guess, fraternization and all that bullshit. Like,
we can't have that.
You can't have that. You don't want that. And so I went to a party, played beer pong with a bunch of seniors, walked back to the Naval Academy, was smashed. I might have even handed the gate guard my Blockbuster card as my military ID. And so I got locked down right then, taken to the office, breathalyzer, and then put on restriction right away. So like doing the marching tours at 6 a.m. before the sun's up.
What's a tour?
It's essentially where you go out to this square right outside Bancroft Hall, which is the dormitory, and you just walk in a square for an hour as slow as you possibly can holding a rifle. It's boring as hell. If you get caught talking, I was actually on restriction with one of the girls soccer players, and we actually got 5 more tours because like we were talking during it. So we were like walking because we didn't know anybody was watching us, but they do watch you because they're sneaky as hell. So they came out, busted us talking, put us on 5 more tours or 5 more days or whatever it was. And yeah, that was that.
Tell me about other times that you may have left campus and come back to campus unbeknownst to the university or the
Yeah.
Naval Academy, whatever you call it.
So one of the things that sucks about it is like you don't really get what they call liberty or time off the yard. So all 4 years you have to live in that dormitory. Typically, as you go from freshman year to sophomore year to junior year to senior year, you get more days off, right? Like, so you can go out your senior year, like maybe on a Tuesday night off the yard or Thursday night off the yard or to the like local bar that they had on campus there. What we would do is sneak out. We had what we called a sponsor mom. She hosted athletes. Her name was Penny Vossen. We called her Miss V. Over 200 Academy grads like have gone through her house and program because she was so nice and fortunate to be able to do that for us. But we'd jump in her trunk, sneak out, and then she would drive us back in the trunk. So we'd have 2 or 3 people in the trunk coming back to
What kind of car was this?
It was a Toyota Camry.
You and other middies would be in a Camry?
Yeah.
Is that what you said? In the back of a Camry trunk, 3 people in one trunk.
Sometimes, yeah.
Would you
It
like, put
depended
the
if there's-
seats down? Like how, like that seems tight.
Yeah.
You're like a little
tight.
ball of Division I soccer players.
Wrestlers, soccer players. Yeah, we probably only got one of those 7-footers for the basketball team in there, but they probably rode by themselves. I never rode with the basketball players. So we had them though.
How many times do you think you took that trunk ride in and out?
Oh wow, more than I could count.
More than you could count.
Yeah,
Over 20?
easily over 20.
So you snuck out of the Naval Academy and back in more than 20 times in the back of a Toyota Camry.
Yeah.
Were you ever caught?
No. I mean, she was really good at her craft.
I mean, that's pretty good.
she could sneak me.
Tell me a little bit more about her. You know, obviously she's been big in your life and more recently she passed away. So
Yeah. So Miss V lived right off the Academy, campus and everything. Her husband was an 06, went to the Naval Academy. He was a submariner. He passed away, unfortunately, like 20, 25 years ago. And that's when she started sponsoring midshipmen. So bringing them into her home. And I think like that interaction and that family like helped keep her young. So she's on the cover of Sports Illustrated. Like David Robinson's been in her house before. She's got pictures with him. He was good friends.
do you think that David Robinson rode in the back of her Camry trunk?
I can't remember what she said. I know I asked her at one point, but she just her book just got released. Obviously she didn't release it now, but her book just got released. And if that happened, it's in there. And I haven't had the chance to read it yet. I've got to get a copy of that. But I would imagine so. If he was out, he probably snuck out in the trunk.
That's pretty epic. What did you want to do in the Navy? Did you even think about that as all this was going on?
Yeah, I mean, initially going into it, I wanted to do my 5 years. We call it 5 and dive. You do 5 years in the service, surface warfare. So you go to a ship or multiple ships, do your tours there, and then you get out and go into, corporate America or whatever you want to do. So initially, that's what I wanted to do. I picked, surface warfare officer. My grades weren't great at the Naval Academy, so a pilot wasn't an option, so the ship life was the life for me.
Now you're in the Navy, and what was that transition like?
The Academy does a really good job of preparing you for that, like actually going out to the fleet and serving on those ships. We do summer tours, so I had already been on the USS Cole, the USS Carney for like 2 and 3 weeks at a time.
So the Cole, which is pretty significant.
Yep.
Tell me about that. What was that like?
Yeah, they were attacked out in the middle of the ocean. Small craft came up, blew up right on them, killed several sailors. I think around, like over 20 at least. But obviously that's a very like traditional ship.
Right.
It means a lot to a lot of people. They actually tried to get me to go to that ship on ship selection night, USS Cole. I picked an amphib due to some advice from my soccer coach. He was also an Academy player. He told me to go the amphib route because it's a little more fun, a little more low key, as opposed to like the crew day ships, which are cruisers, destroyers, firing tomahawks. We were transporting Marines and doing amphibious type missions, which was cool. The transition, I felt like I was pretty well prepared for. Essentially, like as a junior officer, you go out there, you're pretty much getting trained by your chief that, E7, or E8 that's preparing you to lead sailors as you do your qualifications, learn how to drive the ship, and really get ready to go to war. So
What was your motivation kind of leading up to that? Being a Division I athlete's really difficult. Going to a great school is difficult. Graduating with adversity. What was your motivation throughout all of that?
Yeah, I think overall it was always a new challenge. There was always something coming up that we were trying to do or accomplish, and I really enjoyed that. So whether it was a particular mission like doing counter piracy or doing landings on the beaches with LCACs and stuff like that, I really enjoyed that aspect of the challenge, and then leading and learning from the sailors that I was put in charge of to lead, which was great. I learned a lot about how to be a good leader, what a bad leader does. Doesn't come without confrontation, which I think was healthy, getting some conflict and working through that, finding ways to have resolutions and make sure that we're still accomplishing what we need to accomplish out there. So
you didn't continue that path though.
I did not. So it's also and just to be real here, it's a pretty shitty community. So
why?
There's it's a lot of competition, but it's also a lot of backstabbing because people are trying to get to the next promotion, the next rank. And to do that, sometimes people throw each other under the bus. And that's something that the surface warfare community is kind of known for, to be honest. And I hope that culture has changed since I got out of it.
Right.
And I've got friends that are going and being captains of ships now. And I truly believe that culture is hopefully changing for the better.
Is that pretty weird? Like some of your classmates of this clown's going to go be the boss? Like, what is that like?
Yeah, 100%. So like one of the guys that I went to prep school with, he just took over command, did his change of command out in San Diego. And I was joking with him because some of our mutual friends from prep school went out there. I told him, you're going to have the shortest command ever. We're going to get you on the front of Navy Times for the fastest relieved captain, because we're going to come out there and like party and ruin that entire ship.
Tell everybody the truth about you.
Yeah, exactly. Like bring out the skeletons and everything. Right. So, but no, it is weird seeing them take command, but it's also like really awesome because they're really good people and really good leaders. And with them at the helm, I think the Navy's in like really good shape. Like I feel good about the ships that they're going to lead into battle.
What would you tell somebody who is going to go that same path? There's a lot of people who want that. That is a pearl of great price for the asking. Like to get to go that pipeline, regardless of what you saw on the other end. What advice would you give to someone like yourself or to yourself when you're younger on that path?
I would tell them to stay positive through it all. I think I got down a little bit on some of it just because you are constantly getting the shit kicked out of you, especially freshman year. I would say take a step back and try to enjoy it. It's all pretty much a game anyways. It's not, you're getting yelled at by like other students. Like that's not that serious. But when you're doing it, you're like, man, this sucks. Like that guy was an asshole. Like, why did they just yell at me for an hour for no reason and like take me in a room to do push-ups? So I would say like, go at it with all this like a sense of humor. Cause like once I started doing that, it was a lot more fun, like making jokes, having fun, being like, fuck this dude, like, over it.
All right. So you did 2 tours on ships. So that's about 4 years. That's kind of at that point where the 5 and dive that you said, that's like typically the last thing, you do one thing and then you get out, but you didn't. Why not? What did you do next?
Yeah, I wanted to stay in Hawaii. So my second ship was USS Chosin out of Pearl Harbor. So I was lucky enough to get stationed in Hawaii. And once I was done, that was only an 18-month tour. I was the damage control assistant, which is in charge of like firefighting for the ship and everything. And then I got to go to the Defense Information Systems Agency, which is basically handles the communications across the entire DoD for all the armed services, for all the agencies. They're basically the backbone for all comms through, the DoD, which was awesome. I worked on an operations floor there. I got to work with the Air Force, Army, Navy. So it was a joint command, which was awesome, led by a 3-star Air Force general at the time. I worked for a Marine Corps colonel, which was one of the best leaders and mentors that I've ever had in my life.
Why? What did that person do? What did that Marine 06 do?
He actually really cared about the people, which people say, but they don't actually do. So like, if he told you he was going to do something, he followed through, took care of it, and made sure that you and your family or that sailor or airman or whoever you were asking to support was supported. And then he would follow up with you, especially as a junior officer, to make sure that you did what you were supposed to do to look after your people. So not only did he look after us as junior officers, he made sure that we were looking after like the enlisted people that were serving with us as well. And I just found a lot of respect. He also came in and would like kick his boots up on my thing, lay back and just be like, Carter, tell me what the fuck's going on. Don't bullshit. Like, tell me what's going on. And that was something weird that I hadn't experienced in the Navy because it's very formal, very regimented. Like, you just don't really do that. And I think that transparency was really good for that command. And it was a really good culture. That's the first really great culture that I had experienced in the military from a 06 level down to, the lowest person on the totem pole working there, and everybody mattered, which was cool.
How long did you stay there?
So I was there for 3 years. And then as I was transitioning and thinking about getting out, a position opened up at the National Security Agency, so NIAC Hawaii Navy Information Operations Command. It was going to be tied specifically to the Defense Information Systems Agency. So the colonel asked if I would go lead that team associated with his team. So I went and worked for NIAC Hawaii, but I was operationally tasked by the colonel and the general at DISA, which was really cool. So we stood up one of the first Department of Defense cyber protection teams for the Navy, built out the equipment, the kits, and that was a really cool experience because that was my first experience really with like cybersecurity, with some of the hackers that do their thing in computers and stuff like that. Like, I didn't get that technical expertise or training, but my analysts that were on our team did.
You have civilians, or were they also active duty? Were they NSA? Like, who were you working with at that time? Was it a joint?
Yeah, no. So this was specifically Navy with joint forces. So other cyber protection teams we worked with, like the Marine Corps, we worked with the Army, we worked with the Air Force. We teamed up with a National Guard team called Mo Cyber. They helped us build out the kits, which was a really cool experience because they were all full-time civilian jobs, but their part-time jobs were National Guard and stuff like that. So they worked for, Fortune 500 companies on the cybersecurity side. One of them owned their own company. He eventually sold.
And that's pretty interesting.
Yeah. So they were just some really, really brilliant guys, and I learned a lot. They taught our team a lot. We did some cool missions that obviously we can't talk about. I had a really cool warrant officer as well. You got to meet Corey at one point, and he was a lot of fun to work with, and we did a lot of great things with that team, and we had great people.
What did you learn different from being a surface warfare officer to kind of go into that? That's a big jump, I think.
Yeah.
What were some takeaways from that?
So you have to be very adaptive in the surface warfare Navy. Things are constantly changing. Things don't always go to plan. You have to be very flexible. And then going into the communication side, like understanding the technical aspects of computers, like my profession, I was an information professional, which is communications, cybersecurity, networking, stuff like that. And I'd never really done anything with that. Typically you come from like computer science backgrounds, and if you go into that field and stuff, but I just found it also fascinating, the ones and zeros, and seeing how everything works, how we're defending our nation from a cybersecurity perspective, what we're doing on the offensive side. So I got to go, up to the, some different places and see different things with different agencies, which was very eye-opening for what's happening in the world and how we're postured to defend ourselves, which was awesome. It gave me a lot of trust in what we're doing as a country.
Do you think that we're very safe? Or do you think that, the boogeyman, are we a leader in that? Are we better than we know, or do we have stuff to be worried about?
I think we're always going to have stuff to be worried about, but we've got some of the best people in the world. I truly believe that. I think that our adversaries are very good at what they do, and I think we're right there, step block, if not ahead of them, and we're always trying to get ahead of them, as they are with us. Next step was getting out, getting married, daughter on the way. But I did meet my wife in the service. I met her in Djibouti, Africa. So I was flown out. Like I said, my ship in Hawaii was actually on deployment. I was stationed on the East Coast, moving to the West Coast. I went and stayed in Bahrain for 3 weeks, which was kind of hell because I was what they call like on the ready. Like, I'm in a hotel room and they're like, hey, you're just going to get a random phone call one night. You need to be ready to go, bags packed, jump on a helicopter and go out to sea. So I'm like, well, dude, this time. So I'm like just kind of like stuck in Bahrain by myself in a hotel room. Fortunately, I ran into some buddies like from the academy and got to hang out with them and stuff. And then finally got that call, flew to Djibouti, Africa, where the ship had pulled in for turnover with another ship that was going to be heading home. And the first time I met my wife was at what we call beer on the pier. It's when like the ship pulls in, everybody can get off. You have a couple beers to decompress. You know, you've been out at sea doing whatever, and got on board. We went and deployed for 5 months, came back, started dating, and
So you were on the same ship.
we were on the same ship. We actually worked very close together. I was the damage control assistant. She was the main propulsion assistant. So we worked very closely together.
Okay.
Yeah. Came back, dated, lived in Hawaii for a few years. She actually got orders to Colombia, South America. So she went and worked at the embassy there. So we did long distance for a while. And then she went to grad school at Boston College for her MSW. So we did long distance again, which was tough. And then she came back out to Hawaii. And then when I got out, we moved back to North Carolina because that's where I'm from. And her family's from the East Coast as well.
What was your interaction with the Navy? I know some of the stories you've shared with me with Jimmy Carter from your service, your career, and some mementos that he gave you. So talk through some of that.
Yeah. So like throughout each stage, whenever there was a significant moment, you know, graduation from the Naval Academy, just going to see him and hanging out, he would always just give me something that had something to tie back to whatever I was interested in. So I've got one of his lucky bag yearbooks that's signed by him, which is pretty cool, signed over to me. I've got that atlas of pretty much the world that he signed over to me when I graduated. I've got this is probably one of the coolest things that I have and treasure. My dad and I went and saw him down in Georgia. We were in his house. I was telling him about how I was learning fly fishing, loved it. I didn't know he had actually written a book on like fly fishing. You know, so I'm like, shit, I should have known that. So he goes back into his back room, brings me back a little green Orvis case that I think I showed you at one point.
You showed me, yeah.
Yeah, there's 6 flies that he tied himself. He learned how to tie. That's what his book was on and stuff. And he gave that to me, signed the back of it. And I just thought that was really cool. I've got that.
So you have hand-tied lures from, Jimmy Carter.
Yeah.
It's pretty good.
And then the other thing that's really special to me, because one of my really, really good friends out in Hawaii painted it, is a picture of him as a midshipman. And it's a really cool, like, collage type painting. And my dad's a clown, so he told me to bring that down to Georgia, and we had him sign that on the collar, which was pretty cool. So I've got like it's a little bigger than this right here, this painting signed by him that he signed in the back of the church that he used to preach at all the time, it's pretty cool.
Generally speaking, most people think that he is a pretty amazing ex-president,
Yes.
the life that he lived subsequently. I mean, I imagine that it's yes, but does he live up to that in person? The humble peanut farmer from Georgia building houses in his 90s.
Yeah, I'm 100%. So I think if you talk to anybody that's actually came across him or met him, they will say that he's one of the nicest, most down to earth people that you'll ever meet, along with, Rosalind, who just passed not long ago. Very down to earth, very sweet, also very direct and not somebody that you ever want to mess with, right? Like him or her.
Right.
A lot of people said that she was the only one that could really tell him what to do. So, and she would put her foot down on certain things, which was fun to watch happen. But that was a really cool experience just being around them because they were such good role models just about everything. And like you said, he's known for being a better president after his presidency. So it was always a little awkward being at the academy, going through like political science classes and hearing them talk a little bit of shit about Jimmy, even though he was alumni there. And then I'm like, yeah, I mean, you're talking about my uncle right now. It's kind of fucked up. I couldn't say anything because I didn't want anybody there. And then that was fun. And then one of my professors was actually one of the Iranian hostage crisis people that was stuck in the embassy during the transition from Jimmy going out. So that was obviously awkward because he talked us through all that, what happened, what, get the hell out of there. Like, so I actually never told him that I was related to him either, but it was fun. It was very unique. It was always a weird thing. I was looking back at pictures the other day, like just being at the cabin and catching fish and having him there with us. He was so down to earth, like so chill and just like almost like just a country boy, like raised in Plains, Georgia, middle of nowhere. It's almost like he never really lost that, him and Rosalind, which was cool because very down to earth.
I mean, that's the perception, I think. So
yeah, I think they live up to that for sure.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
All right. Transition out of the military, having kids, and talk about some of the namesake honors anyway, as we go through.
Yeah, so that's a cool story too. So we have my daughter. Her name's Lillian. She's named after my grandmother's mother, Jimmy Carter's mother. Yeah, so that relationship. My grandmother is Jimmy Carter's sister. So their mother was Lillian. We named our daughter Lillian. I think they really loved that. That meant a lot to him from, talking to him. And he said nobody's ever named anybody in the family after Lillian. Thought that was pretty cool. We went down and did the gender reveal for my son with them. We let them open up the card of whether it was a boy or a girl. We had a card from like the doctor's office. We had decided that we were going to name, if we were having a daughter, Rosalind, right? So we were like, well, this would be cool. They can do the gender reveal. And if it's a girl, it's Rosalind. And so they open up the card and it's a boy. And I'm like, well, I guess we're not doing Rosalind. So that's not happening. So we had decided on Deacon before that. And one cool thing there was, so we name them Deacon Charles. They do the gender reveal. I'm stoked because now girl and boy, I've got one of each. That's, that's awesome. And a little bit later, somebody was talking to my wife and they're like, that's cool. So you named him Deacon after the president. And we were like, what? No, we named him Deacon because we think it's a cool name. It's just a badass name. And it was funny because they were like, well, that was his like call sign. His call sign when he was president. If anything went down with the Secret Service, it was like Deacon, 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 get the president the fuck out of here, right? Like all hell's breaking loose, let's go. So he was Deacon and Rosalind was like Tiny Dancer or something like that. Or just Dancer, just Dancer because they were D's, yeah. And I thought that was pretty cool. So that was like, we didn't do it intentionally.
Just serendipitous.
Yeah, it just happened that way. And then we did eventually have another daughter and we named her Rosalind and she got to go down and sit in Rosalind's lap and just, she was so ecstatic about it that she was like, this is my tiny little namesake. This is my tiny little namesake. So that was really special. And it was a lot of fun. And then my brother finally had a daughter. He had 3 boys and he named his daughter Ruth after my grandmother, which was cool.
Very
so
cool.
Kind of got all of them rolled up into the family.
It's really
which
neat.
is fun.
Transitioning out of the military. I mean, we talked about kids and whatever. Let's go through that.
Yeah. So getting out, actually was a stay-at-home dad for 7 months. So Fallon and I talked about it. We moved back to North Carolina, lived in my grandmother's lake house. We just paid rent to her as we transitioned and we're trying to figure out what we were doing. Fallon had just graduated from social work school. So she got a job as a social worker. So we both just agreed that I would go back to school and just stay home with the daughter, be a stay-at-home dad.
Live that sad life.
Stay-at-home dad life. And that was really special. Like I got to bond with my firstborn for 8 months before I had to go back to work, right? So like I was going to work and then at night I was doing school for, a graduate program. And that time was just really special. I used to joke with Fallon that, I was in the mom's club all day, just strolling around the neighborhood, pushing our daughter around, So we came up with shirts like they see me strolling and all kinds of sad life type stuff and just had a lot of fun with it. But that's something that I'll always cherish because like you get into the rat race of working and life and everything like that. But that was my time just like with her.
You ended up going back to school as well.
Yes.
When did you do that?
So right when I got out in 2017, I got accepted into the Master's of Public Administration program at Carolina. So I went back to school at Chapel Hill.
So finally get that Carolina degree.
That's it. So another interesting thing was my dad was very close with Dean Smith and his family. So grew up knowing Dean Smith, grew up knowing his son, Scott Smith. He used to bring us like Converse shoes with like Batman and Joker and all kinds of cool stuff that he would get. But Dean Smith grew up a diehard Carolina fan. My parents were Carolina fans. My grandfather went to Carolina. My grandmother, Ruth, actually went to Carolina and got her graduate degree there. So just a lot of ties to Chapel Hill. I wanted to go there coming out of high school. I didn't get recruited by Chapel Hill. I would have had to try to walk on there. And so kind of held that against Chapel Hill, but still loved them and still pulled for them. And then finally got back and got a degree from there, which was fun. So going back to work was interesting, diving into the corporate world. I went through a transition program, which was really good. So it was a junior military officer transition program. They got me teamed up with some interviews with Corning, which was Corning Optical Communications, fiber optics type stuff, communications. And so I actually went there for 2.5 years.
What skill sets do you think that you got in that transition period at Corning?
It was very project management based. So like going through, I mean, I'd already done PMP and stuff like that, but like going through and actually dealing with some of the bigger data centers and actually the fiber cable runs and stuff like that, getting the projects in scope on time was a big deal. So that push and making sure that everything was good to go and that Corning was maintaining their reputation amongst the really big powerhouses and, social media and stuff like that for their data centers was, and other data centers was really important, really good.
As you're doing that, do you think that the military was a really good pathway to do that? Do you think, I feel like running a ship and being a SWO, probably you ran into similar problems in project management. Do you think that that's a good progression?
Yeah, absolutely. Like that prepared me for almost anything that I think I would encounter anywhere or any job. And if not, being able to like figure it out, right? Like almost like what we joke about, let me Google that for you. Like it's pretty basic. Go just figure it out and get it done. And like, let's get back on track, get the mission accomplished. So it's like that very driven, the Navy's very good about like, hey, let's do what we need to do to get the mission accomplished.
Do you think school helped you? Do you think that just going through the Navy, it would have mattered or it helped?
I like school because you're constantly engaging in different activities and in different subjects that you probably wouldn't normally engage. Like I'm not going to pick up like an economic development book, right? Like I'm not going to go read that, but actually diving into that and talking about how you can improve an entire community just by like, putting a park in that location and reading about like the effects that has down the line. I like the expansion of like knowledge across different, areas and trying to be a little bit more well-rounded and stuff I don't know that I probably wouldn't do on my own. And I know that because I haven't picked up any of those books since I left.
Why are we sitting here talking to each other?
Because we work for one of the coolest companies around.
Why did you say yes?
Because our mission is incredible. We're trying to save lives and we're going to make the world a better place. And it's interesting. I love this fact. And I've never told you about this, but one thing that we consistently talked about in my MPA program was what they called wicked problems. Those are those that like that's in several books, like
a sticky booger.
Exactly. Yeah. Sticky booger, the grossness. This is one of the biggest systemic problems in the United States. And it's a wicked problem. And the fact that you guys decided to try to take this on is something that I wanted to be a part of. And it's been an incredible journey so far. And I can't see what else we do in the future.
I mean, I think that you probably remember our first conversations more than you brought it up a couple of times, but I don't remember what it was that I said, but I probably like, well, you basically do this for free, whatever. It wasn't quite free, but in comparison, probably, I don't know if this is going to work and I can't really pay you anything. You want to do it anyway? And you're all in. So some of it was the motivation of solving a difficult problem. Kieran also recruited you, who we've talked about with the similar pathways. You were both in the Naval Academy. You both were on the same ship. What brought you into a startup? What have you enjoyed about this path that other people looking in, because it's a little scary not making money and it's a little scary doing something when you're literally told by people, I don't know if it's going to work, but we're going to try hard. What have you learned? What have been some of the takeaways from that risk that you took, that faith that you had to go do something else, both in us and in yourself? I'm more interested in yourself.
Yeah. And just to start back at the beginning, first of all, like that was a decision that Fallon and I had to make. So we made that decision together. And so like a lot of the credit goes to her for like, I went to Fallon after you and I talked and said, look, this mission's awesome. The people are awesome. The culture's awesome. What should I do? And she said, I think you just answered your question. I was like, we're going to struggle for a while, right? Like we're going to struggle. And she was like, and we could fail. Like I told her everything that you had told me, like we could fail. Startup. Got it. Never worked for a startup, but understood the risk. And she said, so you can tell me you're going to go work with some of the coolest people in the world, some of the most motivated people in the world. You're going to get to have fun. You're going to have fun doing it. And you're going to save lives. You're going to make our kids safer in this school system and make the world a better place. She said, what's the worst thing that's going to happen? I was like, I guess I just go get another job. And she's like, yeah, dude, let's jump. Let's go. I think the thing that attracted me the most, and this is one of the conversations that I tell a lot of our employees coming in. The first time that I interviewed with you, I said, hey, Rob, like, I know you guys are a startup, you're fairly new, but like, have you guys talked about any core values or stuff that you want to stay very focused on? And we were doing a video conference interview and you said no jerks. And I started laughing and you got very serious and said, why is that funny? And I was like, oh shit, I'm in trouble in my interview. Like, how did I get in trouble so fast in an interview? And I was like, oh dude, I thought you were kidding. You were like, no, I'm absolutely serious. And I was like, well, that's awesome. And I had never heard that before.
Right.
I know that there's some companies that have similar policies like core values and stuff like that. But I fell in love with that. And I think that's what a lot of people fall in love with coming into our company. And I think that we've stood by that. It's a very fun environment with very, very high caliber people, but that want to have fun and make it a fun journey, right?
I mean, the tough thing that I've had is that I've worked for jerks. And sometimes I think that people view a very loud, a very stern, someone who's always talking, someone who's charismatic as a great leader. And none of those things are necessarily true. They can be. And for whatever reason, we tolerate competent jerks in a lot of life. And it's poisonous and it made everyone miserable. And I think every ship that you go on is different. It just depends on what that group is. I am confident, though, that there's a lot of people that overcompensate and act like jerks. Why do we need to lead life this way? And
Right.
and so, like, if we're going to do it our way and we're going to solve a problem in a way that we want, let's do it in the way we want to do it as well. So,
Oh yeah.
yeah.
Agreed.
Transitioning military people, you've gone and done a lot of cool jobs in the military.
Yeah.
You've gone to places that people desire and work hard to get to. But I think some of our audience are people who transition from the military and try to figure out what their path is.
Yeah.
What advice would you give your younger self or to those people who are trying to, like, what does that next step look like? You went and got a degree and worked for a big company before you took this leap. Is that the right step? What advice would you give?
So for me, I've always been a person of like, I don't need help. I'll do it on my own. Right. Like I was a little bit stubborn and pretty much naive and immature about that. I would say networking is probably one of the biggest things as you transition out. I think what we do here with SkillBridge and with helping people transition out, I would say use every resource that you possibly have to network, get your name out there, and don't get stuck doing something you don't like. Like life is way too short to do something that's not challenging, but also like very, very rewarding. If you've gone and served in the military, you know that it can be very intense. There's almost nothing you can't really handle, especially like coming from that into a civilian job, right? Like there's nothing that's going to be life-threatening, I'll say, right?
Tell me a couple of rewarding experiences that you've had helping build this, because I mean, I don't know how many employees we had when you joined, maybe
We were right around like 9.
9. So we were under 10 and we're at like 170 now, somewhere around there. Tell me about some moments, maybe 2 moments that you would pick that are rewarding or very difficult, or something that stands out in your mind of those experiences that you'll never forget, that have molded you a little bit.
Yeah. Like you said, I mean, just on our team alone, we're over 40 people. The thing that I love the most and probably brings me the most joy is when we sit down and do one-on-ones and I get the feedback that in each position from top to bottom in operations, that person always says, this is the best job I've ever had. This is the most fun I've had. And that's with the amount of stress that we're under to deliver this service, right? Going to one of the sites where there was actually a shooting was very life-changing and very difficult. And that was one of the most rewarding and difficult things that I've had to deal with going through this position.
So unfortunately, we end up going to some of the sites where some of these events have occurred that make the news. And it's, a little bit after the fact and whatever it is. And hopefully we can do this in a way that we can prevent those things from occurring. But talk through that. So you went to a site where one of these terrible shootings occurred and you talked to the people who were involved. What did you learn?
How important it is to get this safety taken care of for these students. So I walked the path. I'll talk a little bit about it. I walked a path with the school resource officer that responded to the incident. We literally walked through every scenario that happened that day, which was a tragedy. And then we talked about how this solution could help and be a proactive solution, or even just an actionable intelligence solution, so that they would have had more information than they did that day to help neutralize that threat. So the reason it was so difficult for me is because of my daughters. And that's the story. And I'm not going any further.
Fair enough. I get it. So we'll move into anything final to say about ZeroEyes or your experiences here, and we'll move on to a little silliness after this. Any little last nugget or takeaway that you want to share?
No, I just appreciate being a part of the team. I'm glad you brought me on. I've loved working with this team. I've loved meeting everybody that started it. And thank you to you guys for sucking it up and getting it going off the ground. That's a big jump. And that's one that I don't know that I would have been able to make in the beginning. So I came in at a good time.
I mean, it's been nothing but a pleasure. I love working with you. I love you, Carter.
I love you too, Rob.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So now let's get to some silly things. Give me 5 movies that you love and perhaps shaped you a little bit. Doesn't matter what. It doesn't need to be profound. It doesn't need to be 5. Give me a couple.
So my go-to would have to be like for comedy, like Dumb and Dumber, because that's something that we quoted nonstop. One that my wife still hasn't seen, which is driving me insane. And this was one that I really liked in high school just because it was so rebellious and a bunch of clowns is Dazed and Confused. Like, I don't know why I love that one so much, but that's a classic to me. One of the weirder ones that wasn't really a big hit, but for some reason I really liked it. I've never been able to really explain why. I've just always I've watched it over and over, is V for Vendetta.
Okay.
That's an interesting one that I don't even know if people have necessarily seen that one, but
remember the 5th of November.
Exactly. Yeah. So maybe it's that saying that got me hooked. I don't know. And then, I mean, I'm into all the classics like Braveheart, stuff like that, Gladiator. That's what we've been doing a lot. I'm into the kids movies now, obviously, because.
Oh, what's the best kids movie?
The best kids movie? My kids really like Sing. We took them to Ninja Turtles, and then we just got the Xbox One game. So my son is
is that fun?
Stoked on it. He's like, Dad, please play a video game with me. This is the best day ever. So that's what I did actually before I flew up here on Memorial Day. I played games with him.
Some Ninja Turtles?
And then Ghostbusters is the classic that me and my wife are big fans of. So going to see the latest one was pretty cool.
All right. What is the best piece of advice that you've ever been given? And did you take that advice?
This is something that my dad and I talked about, and I'll tell you why. So there's a speech that's one of my favorite. I think I've talked with the team about it before, but Jimmy V's "Don't Ever Give Up" speech, right? So I've got a picture that was given to me by my dad. It's Jimmy V with his championship. Sometimes you'll see it if I'm working from home. It's in the background. And it says, "To Mike, a guy destined for success, Jimmy V." So "Don't Ever Give Up" is probably one of the coolest speeches. I watch it every year pretty much. And then it's something that I try to definitely live by, because you're going to fail, right? We all fail all the time. But one of our other things is get back up and get back in the fight, right? So that's what we're constantly doing. That's what we're always going to do. And that's something I want to teach my children, and, just to keep charging, keep going. Life's tough. So we called this No Bell, our little podcast. And in the teams, when you quit, you ring the bell. No bell means never quit. That's all it means. And so let's leave it on that. Thank you for joining us, and thank you for sharing your story. Thanks, Rob.
That's it for this episode. If you want to check out more from the podcast, head to ZeroEyes.com/nobel, where you can see show notes, read more about our guests, and suggest guests or topics of your own. Until next time, stay in the fight. Don't ring the bell.